On December 6, 2014, 19-year-old Jessica Chambers met her abrupt and tragic end in Cortland, Mississippi. First responders found her walking near her burning car with over 90% of her body covered in burns. Despite her critical injuries, she reportedly uttered the name Eric or Derek when asked who had harmed her. Jessica succumbed to her injuries hours later, leaving behind a grieving family and community and a perplexing mystery. The investigation initially focused on identifying Eric or Derek, but no substantial leads emerged and her case went cold. In 2016, attention turned to Quentin Tellis, a 27-year-old man from the same neighborhood who had known Jessica. Authorities alleged that Tellis had been with Jessica on the day of her death, and that cell phone records placed him near the crime scene. He was indicted on capital slaying charges in February 2016. Tellis's first trial in October 2017 ended in a mistrial after the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. A second trial in September 2018 also concluded with a hung jury, leading to another mistrial. The defense emphasized the discrepancy between Jessica's reported identification of her attacker and Tellis's name, while the prosecution highlighted circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime. Let's take a moment to look at the circumstantial evidence that the prosecution brought forth. One of the key pieces of evidence was cell phone data. Investigators analyzed records from both Jessica's and Tellis's phones, which showed that the two devices were in close proximity to each other on the day of the slaying. The records suggested that they had been together in various locations, including near Tellis's home and later near the area where Jessica's car was found ablaze. The prosecution pointed out a gap in Tellis's phone activity during the likely time of the crime. They argued this could mean Tellis deliberately turned his phone off to avoid detection, but the defense countered that there was no direct proof of this intention. Another piece of circumstantial evidence involved a gasoline purchase. Surveillance footage captured Tellis at a gas station buying a prepaid debit card around the time of Jessica's elimination. Prosecutors speculated that he might have also purchased gasoline to ignite her car. That said, they were unable to find any footage of him making a purchase like this. Just the prepaid debit card purchase that happened to go down at a gas station. The defense argued that this was entirely immaterial to the case at hand. DNA evidence also played a role in the case. Tellis's DNA was found on Jessica's car keys, which were recovered at the crime scene. The prosecution highlighted this as evidence of Tellis's involvement, but the defense argued it was not unusual for his DNA to be on the keys, given that he and Jessica were acquaintances. The mere presence of his DNA, they contended, was insufficient to prove any criminal act, especially since it could not be definitively dated to the time of the slaying. Witness testimony further complicated the case. Some witnesses claimed they saw a man resembling Tellis with Jessica on the day she died. Others described Tellis's behavior in the days following the slaying as suspicious or evasive. While these accounts suggested possible involvement, they were not definitive and left room for interpretation. A critical and controversial aspect of the case was Jessica's own statements. When first responders found her severely burned, she reportedly said that Eric or Derek was responsible for the attack. This led investigators to initially focus on suspects with those names, but no viable leads emerged. The prosecution later argued that Jessica's severe injuries might have impaired her ability to speak clearly, suggesting she could have been trying to say a name similar to Tellis. The defense, however, emphasized that Jessica's words didn't match Tellis's name, raising reasonable doubt about his guilt. In addition to the charges in Mississippi, Tellis faced further severe legal issues in Louisiana. He was accused in the 2015 stabbing-slaying of Ming-Chen Xiao, a Taiwanese graduate student studying in America. According to Tellis, he would buy prescription medications off her for the purposes of resale. However, he denied any role in her demise. In November 2022, a judge dismissed the elimination charge with respect to Ming Chen without prejudice, citing procedural delays and the need for Tellis to serve his Mississippi sentence first. A without prejudice dismissal means that the prosecution has the ability to bring the case once again. As of now, Quentin Tellis remains incarcerated in Mississippi, serving a 5-year sentence for an unrelated burglary conviction. His tentative release date from his present incarceration is October 2027. The slaying charges in both Mississippi and Louisiana remain unresolved, leaving the families of Jessica Chambers and Ming-Chen Xiao without closure. Devin Williams, a 29-year-old truck driver from Emporia, Kansas, vanished under mysterious circumstances over Memorial Day weekend in 1995. Devin was a dedicated husband and father of 3. He and his wife, Mary Lou, had recently purchased a new home, marking a joyful milestone in their lives. As an experienced truck driver, Devin was familiar with long hauls and the demands of the road. On May 23, 1995, he departed Kansas for a routine delivery to California, a route he had traveled numerous times without incident. After successfully delivering his cargo in California, Devin began his return journey to Kansas. On the evening of May 27th, he contacted his employer, expressing difficulty sleeping, but remained resolute in continuing his trip. This was the last confirmed communication from him. The following day, campers in Arizona's Tonto National Forest reported a startling sight. There was a massive semi-truck navigating the narrow forest roads, which is of course an extremely unusual and alarming occurrence. Witnesses described the driver as expressionless, making no attempt to communicate or seek assistance. Later, the truck was found abandoned in a meadow, its cargo of lettuce and strawberries intact, refrigeration unit running, and the cab locked. Devin himself was nowhere to be found. Several individuals reported interactions with a man believed to be Devin during this period. One camper recalled a disoriented individual mumbling about going to jail, while another encounter involved a man attempting to light a grill with a $20 bill, exhibiting signs of confusion and incoherence. Authorities launched extensive search operations, including foot patrols and canine units, scouring the area for any trace of Devin. Despite their efforts, no immediate evidence was found. It wasn't until nearly 2 years later, in May 1997, that hikers discovered a human skull approximately half a mile from the location of the abandoned truck. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to Devin Williams. The cause of death remains undetermined, and the rest of his body was never recovered. Several theories have emerged attempting to explain Devin's bizarre behavior and subsequent passing. Some suggest Devin may have experienced a medical crisis, such as a diabetic episode or a stroke, leading to disorientation and irrational actions. Others speculate that certain substances could have induced his erratic behavior. However, Devin had no known history of substance abuse, and his employer confirmed he had consistently passed all required tests. That said, he did report difficulty sleeping, and long-haul truck drivers have been known to use pick-me-ups to meet extremely stringent deadlines. This brings me to the next theory that's often brought up. Some have suggested the possibility of a sudden mental health crisis, though Devin had no prior indications of psychological issues. That said, some theorize that the use of substances could have triggered an episode wherein he became disconnected from reality. Under this theory, he engaged in unusual behavior, including going into the woods alone, where he subsequently met his end due to exposure to the elements. Of course, there's also some who believe Devin may have encountered foul play while in his disoriented state. That said, there's a complete lack of concrete evidence supporting this theory. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here. Hope you're enjoying the latest entry in this series. If you enjoy my content, I've got a small favor to ask you. Hit the share button and send this video to two of your friends. Now let's get back to business. On July 13th, 1959, in Blenheim, New Zealand, a farmer named Eileen Moreland experienced an encounter that would become one of the country's most intriguing UFO sightings. Early that morning, around 5:30 a.m., Moreland set out to bring in her cows for milking. The weather was cold and still, with a thick cloud layer overhead. As she walked, she noticed an unusual green glow emanating from the clouds above, bathing the area in an eerie light. Looking up, Moreland saw two large green lights descending rapidly toward her, accompanied by a band of orange lights. Frightened, she sought refuge among a nearby set of pine trees. From her hiding place, she observed a sharply outlined saucer-shaped object approximately 20 to 30 feet wide, hovering about 15 feet above the ground. The object featured two extremely bright sources of green light on its underside, illuminating an area of about 50 yards. Two rows of small orange jets around the center emitted orange-colored flames and appeared to revolve in opposite directions. The craft was topped by a transparent dome filled with a flickering white light, inside which Moreland could see two figures wearing shiny, close-fitting suits resembling aluminum foil. The occupants wore opaque helmets that rose straight from their shoulders, and one of them stood up, extending his hands as if leaning over to look downward. After a minute or two, the jet started again, and the craft tilted slightly before shooting up vertically at great speed, disappearing into the clouds with a soft, high-pitched sound. A peculiar smell, somewhat similar to pepper, lingered in the air as the object departed. Moreland, though thoroughly shaken, was not stirred, and proceeded with her milking duties, and later reported the incident to the police. And yes, you heard that correctly. Eileen is a woman who completes a task when she sets her mind to it. She got out of bed and told herself, "I'm gonna go milk some cows." And she wasn't gonna let a little thing like a likely alien encounter get in the way of milking. The encounter attracted significant attention from both the public and authorities. The Royal New Zealand Air Force took Moreland's claims seriously, appointing Flight Lieutenant Charles Milford Jennings to investigate. Jennings found Moreland to be a rational and stable person, and local police corroborated her credibility. Additionally, a local farmer named Roy Holdaway, living about 7 kilometers from Moreland's house, reported seeing a bright light in the sky about 30 minutes before Moreland. Despite the thorough investigation, no definitive explanation for the sighting was found. The media and public attention surrounding the encounter were overwhelming, leading Moreland to move away from her home and change her name to avoid the spotlight. Berserkers were among the most fearsome figures of the Viking Age, occupying a unique place in Norse history. Though berserkers are widely known, their connection to the magic rituals and the occult is less widely discussed. The word berserker is derived from an Old Norse term, which translates to bear shirt in English. This term reflects their close association with bear shamanism, as well as their practice of wearing animal pelts, generally those of bears, into battle. These warriors were famed for their ability to enter a trance-like state of unbridled rage, known as Berserker Gang, during combat. The Berserker Gang was characterized by a number of distinct traits: immense physical strength, a seeming immunity to pain, and an overwhelming aggression that struck terror into their enemies. In this state, berserkers were described as impervious to fire and iron, though these claims are often regarded as hyperbole or myth. Some historians suggest their trance-like fury may have been induced by consuming psychoactive substances such as mushrooms. This theory is contentious, but it aligns with shamanic practices found in various cultures, which often include altered states of consciousness to connect with the spiritual or animalistic world. Bear shamanism played a central role in the berserker's identity. In Norse mythology, the bear symbolized immense power, ferocity, and resilience, qualities berserkers sought to emulate. By wearing bear skins and adopting bear-like behaviors, these warriors aimed to embody the spirit of the bear, merging human and animal characteristics. The process of transformation into a berserker likely involved elaborate rituals. These may have included chanting, rhythmic dancing, and fasting to prepare the warrior mentally and physically for the berserker gang. Some historical accounts describe berserkers as biting their shields or howling like animals before combat, further emphasizing their departure from human norms and alignment with animalistic fury. Lynn Ellen Amos, a 38-year-old financial analyst, was slain in her townhouse in Washington, D.C. on December 11, 1995. Originally from Alabama, Lynn Amos held an MBA from the University of Texas. She had a successful career in finance, including positions at Bankers Trust and Booz Allen Hamilton in New York City. In August 1995, she relocated to Washington, D.C. to join the Barron's Group as a financial consultant. Her role involved frequent trips to Mexico, where she assessed the lending practices of large banks. In the early hours of December 11, 1995, firefighters responded to a blaze at Lynn's residence. They found her unconscious on her burning bed, suffering from third-degree burns over 80% of her body. Despite being rushed to the hospital, she succumbed to her injuries 10 days later, on December 21st. Initially, authorities considered her death a tragic accident. A cigarette butt was found near her bed, and her blood alcohol level was found to be elevated well beyond the legal limit for driving. These factors led to the theory that she had accidentally set herself on fire while smoking in bed. But let's just say there was about to be what I can only term a massive crack in this investigative theory. Friends and family disputed this narrative, citing the fact that Lynn wasn't a smoker and never had been. Their concerns prompted a more thorough investigation, which revealed traces of accelerants, kerosene, gasoline, and turpentine on her mattress, floor, and pillow. This evidence indicated that the fire was deliberately set, leading authorities to classify her death as a slaying rather than an accident. Also, I just need to take a quick moment to point out what may be the obvious here. Had Lynn been a smoker, it seems like there's a pretty good chance that the authorities would have stuck with their initial ruling and never found the numerous accelerants at the scene. If that's not shoddy police work, I don't know what is. But anyway, I digress. The investigation faced significant obstacles right from the beginning. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Lynn either knew her assailant or the perpetrator had access to her home. Additionally, the crime scene was not immediately treated as such, possibly leading to the loss of crucial evidence. Despite these challenges, authorities continued to explore leads, including the possibility of a professional job. Personally, I can't help but seeing the fact that Lynn's home wasn't treated as a potential crime scene immediately as likely meaning there'll never be justice. This is doubly true if she was eliminated by a professional who may have left only the slightest clues to begin with. Speculation arose that Lynn's death was connected to her professional activities. She had confided in friends about uncovering questionable lending practices during her investigations in Mexico, describing her forthcoming report as, quote, ugly. Some friends believed she might have stumbled upon fraudulent loans or dealings involving cartel money, potentially making her a target for those involved. Others have speculated that she could have uncovered connections between the Mexican bank she was investigating and corruption in the United States. That said, at the end of the day, everything with Lynn's case unfortunately continues to remain entirely speculative. The Meroitic language was once spoken in the ancient kingdom of Meroe, located in what is now Sudan, between roughly 300 BC and 400 AD. It's believed that Meroitic belongs to the Nilo-Saharan family, which includes various languages spoken across Central and Eastern Africa. However, confirming that classification has proven tricky, mainly because scholars can't fully translate the current body of Meroitic texts. Francis Griffith made significant strides in deciphering the script in 1909. He identified certain phonetic values, but his work hasn't yielded a complete understanding of the vocabulary and grammar. Meroitic scripts exist in two main forms, hieroglyphic and cursive, both of which share some visual similarities with Egyptian hieroglyphs. Yet, aside from superficial resemblance, they function differently, with unique symbols representing distinct phonetic values. Our knowledge of Meroitic is based on the roughly 1,300 inscriptions we've uncovered so far, many of which are short funerary texts or royal inscriptions. These inscriptions have been found on temples, stelae, and even personal items like jewelry. Though the texts are an invaluable resource, scholars struggle because of the limited variety of subject matter and the relative lack of extensive bilingual texts. Unlike the famous Rosetta Stone, which helped decode Egyptian hieroglyphs by providing the same passage in multiple languages, there isn't a Meroitic equivalent. There are a few inscriptions in Meroitic and Greek side by side, but these typically only mention proper nouns and titles, which doesn't provide much insight into everyday vocabulary. The current status of our understanding of Meroitic can be described as a partial breakthrough rather than a full decipherment. Scholars are aware of some grammatical forms and can occasionally recognize names of deities, royal figures, and place names, but we still can't translate entire texts with confidence. Scholars from around the world continue to propose theories regarding the language's grammar, syntax, and lexicon. Excavations in Sudan sometimes yield additional inscriptions or artifacts, but it's rare to find something that radically alters our interpretive framework. With the advent of computational techniques being widely applied to humanities disciplines, researchers are using methods to compare Meroitic with other languages in the Nilo-Saharan family. It's hoped that these methods may help crack the code on Meroitic and bring closure to this unresolved mystery. Also, if this sort of content interests you, remember to check out my history channel, Lazy Chill History, by going to my channel page and clicking the link.